Hey friends, I'm Sharon Betters, and this is the Help and Hope podcast. And I am so eager to introduce to you today our guest, Liz Edrington. We're going to be talking about anxiety and especially anxiety in teenagers. And Liz knows about this because she experienced anxiety as a teen and now has channeled what she learned and experienced and admittedly says she still experiences anxiety into this wonderful devotional book called Anxiety, The Better Story. And it is especially written for teens. But I have to tell you, I have been reading it, and it is for anyone who is struggling with anxiety. Liz is a mental health counselor. She presently is on a staff at a local church. Author, obviously, active life, and I'm so thankful that she was able to take some time to be with us today. So, Liz, welcome to our podcast.
Thanks for having me, Sharon. So glad to be here.
Well, before we jump into our topic, tell us a little bit about yourself that maybe I haven't covered, and one thing that you do when you feel as though life is just spinning out of control.
Ooh, two big questions. Let's see about myself. I live in Chattanooga, Tennessee. I've been here 9 years, which is hard to believe, and all my family's in Virginia. And I live with my golden retriever, Bella, the dog. She's the best. I'm going into my 8th year full-time staff at a church where I wear a number of different hats. I feel called to the church, and had a private practice in counseling here in Chattanooga for about 4.5 years. And then that chapter closed, and the opportunity to teach as an adjunct professor up at Covenant College once a year was presented to me. So I've got to teach in the psychology department and work with, young adults who are, some are still teenagers at 18, 19, but just on that cusp of transitioning into full adulthood, And I've worked with teenagers in one form and another for about 20 years. I love working with teenagers. Youth ministry is my heart.
It's wonderful when I hear somebody say that, because I know that there are some people who have worked with teenagers and said they could never do it because of all the ups and downs and all of that. So to know that you had such a calling, and it shows up in your writing in this book that you've written, you really understand how to grab the heart of a teenager based on my experience with teenagers. And one of the reasons that I wanted to bring you onto the Help and Hope podcast is because I was talking with a few teenagers about their emotions and feelings. And I had asked them, if you could describe your emotions or feelings in one word, what would they be? And they said hopeless and helpless. And I was so sad. I mean, we were able to talk some more about it, and it mainly focused on the culture in which we live and the future of our world and those really big issues, and feeling like there's nothing they can do about it. But I know it goes deeper than that. And so tell me why you were passionate about writing. I'm a writer, so I know it. You have to have a real strong reason for writing such a book. Why do you think it's important for you to put into words what you've learned?
Yeah, a couple of different reasons. Having been in youth ministry this long, I think I've felt the shift kind of from 2012 on, especially where smartphones begin to be more pervasive. And I don't think they are the cause, but man, I think they're big contributing factor. So even, from 2006 to 12 youth ministry, I was youth director of those years, and the level of anxiety and depression, it seems like, has just ramped up since then. So felt need is a huge reason I wrote this. Conversations with teenagers that revolve around anxiety more and more. And, I had my high school students, there are about 20 of them on a Sunday morning, give me do y'all, in the last couple of years, do you think anxiety has gone up, down, or stayed the same? I mean, every thumb was up with one that was like this. So it's just felt need. There's so much anxiety and depression, and your words that you gave it, hopeless and helpless, are really apt. They really fit.
Yeah.
So
it's
the chance to get to, it's heartbreaking. I think empathize with them, and then to offer them the actual hope of the story that we live in, our real story of the Lord coming to the earth and resurrecting.
Well, not only have you the experience of working with real life teenagers, you talk a little bit in your book about your own experience with anxiety as a teenager. Why don't you share a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I wouldn't have even known, I think, to call it anxiety back then.
Mm.
Anxiety is this word we use pretty freely and pretty heavily now. And I think sometimes that's not helpful even, but giving it a name is helpful. So for me, looking back and realizing, especially at so much performance anxiety before any tests, before any paper, actually writing papers, especially, and soccer games, my body would tighten and my stomach would get nauseous, and I couldn't eat 3 hours before a soccer game because I had
Mm.
so much tension in my stomach that I'd get sick. So I had to learn to kind of manage this anxiety by the rest of my life, eating at different times and laying on the floor breathing. And I just, in my head, I was like, I'm so stressed. This is so stressful. But, anxiety is a partner to stress. So yeah, just pretty regular bouts where my shoulders would get tight, and my, shoulders and neck and my stomach, my
Mm.
thoughts would just be spinning so quickly. So it was a regular part of my life back then.
What you mentioned that we use the word anxiety a lot these days. So, what is a good definition of anxiety? I mean, how would you, when you have a counselor or you're talking with a teenager, what are some of the things you look for and you think this is an anxious person, genuinely?
Yeah, that's a good question. If they tell me they're anxious, I'm going to believe them. And I like to give kids actually other words like worry or stress, because I think a lot can be hidden when we take on a label, and it can be kids want to belong, right? Identity, purpose, and belonging are their big three. So to belong to the anxious group, even though it's not something you want to be, also has an appeal. And so I like to give them different vocabulary just to check in and see, does this fit? It might not. Anxiety might be the best word that fits, and we want to use their language. However, I would say anxiety is most simply an emotion. It's an emotion. And so it's not it's not a diagnosis, it's not a pathology before it becomes ramped up and pervasive and pathological. It's just an emotion we experience like any other emotion: anger, sadness, happiness, anxiety. And it manifests in our bodies. Like all emotions tend to have an energy. It's energy in motion. So energy in our bodies in some different ways. And that might be, like I described, tension in your stomach or your jaw or your throat, or heat, or your skin might be itchy or break out in hives, or those sorts of things. But yeah, most simply, an emotion is what I would say.
So, when you talk about this emotion and this anxiety, uh, you're describing how our bodies respond to anxiety. You also have said that anxiety can also be helpful. It's not always a bad thing. What do you mean by that? How could it be helpful? Because I'm 75 and I still get anxious and it doesn't feel helpful at all. So tell me,
That's right.
how is it helpful?
Yeah, and sometimes it really isn't, is the first thing I'd say. We don't have to try to force it into a helpful box when it's not helpful. But so let's say I'm getting ready to speak or teach. I actually really don't like being in front of people. And I start to my knees get a little quivery, my stomach tightens. And so I will kind of in my head say, like, all right, so it's happening. This is really uncomfortable. And my impulse is to want to say, I hate this. I just want to get rid of it. Like, I should know how to deal with this. I'm a counselor, and I'll
Mm.
catch myself in that pattern and then offer the second, like, and you know what this means? My body's telling me I'm ready to go. It is telling me we're going to do this. This matters. So
Mhm.
those two big anxiety can actually be a sign, like, we're getting ready to go. We're getting ready to do the thing, and the thing matters, whatever the thing
Mhm.
is, game time, um, an event, a date, whatever it is.
Mhm.
So it's not just in and of itself a negative thing. And I think that reframe can be helpful of anxiety isn't the enemy. And I think understanding it as an enemy or as something to be fixed can be a part of what perpetuates it. So just to say, this is an emotion I'm experiencing. And you know what? I've experienced it before and I've gotten through it. And here
Mhm.
are my tools I might use. But just to know it is uncomfortable, like, call it what it is. Uncomfortable. I don't like it. I don't want to experience it. And I've been here before. It's just doing its job, trying to get me ready to go. And then if we were talking about that pathological, like ramped up level, then like we might need different help and assistance and a counselor or something else, where if I'm having panic attacks or a heightened, regular, sustained level of anxiety, I might need more resources and more support.
I think, well, you just opened up a whole box of questions for me. But let me see if I'll break it down into just a couple. First of all, I love the example you give about it's like you're ready. It's getting you ready. And I think about a racehorse. And if you've ever watched those races where they're bringing the horses out to the starting line, and those horses are so anxious, they come across that way, but they are ready. They want to run. They are ready to run. So I love thinking about it that way. That's so good. And I really wish I had known that when I was doing a lot of speaking. So I could say, thank you, anxiety, for helping me get ready for this.
Yes.
So that's a really good thing. But you also mentioned some tools, and you include these in your book. It's kind of like when you meet somebody who's really desperately hungry. They have a lot of other issues, but you got to feed them first before they're going to listen to you helping them get to those other issues. And I kind of feel that way about your tool chest, those things that you have a person in front of you who is starting to have a panic attack because they are so anxious about what's in front of them. What are some of those tools that you recommend?
Yeah. The anxiety toolkit was something I really pushed for. The publisher was not on board first. And I was like, no, we're not doing this if I can't have my anxiety toolkit. Because like you're saying, I do think we need some practical things that can then get our brain online, because when our body is so ramped up, we don't necessarily have the cognitive faculties and ability to think through things, or if our brain is so ramped up. So the three big things that I give for the anxiety toolkit are first, breath work. It's so simple, but learning to breathe intentionally is something that can calm our whole system. And actually, you talked about panic attack. I ran into someone that I didn't know outside the church having a panic attack one Sunday morning, and just was like, hey, I know I don't know you, but I'm Liz and I'm a counselor. Would you like any help? And literally just with her, took her to the side and had her breathe with me in. I counted 4 seconds in and 4 seconds out for good couple of minutes, and that calmed her system, calmed her body. So it's simple, but using your breath to breathe in and breathe out can often be helpful. So every now and then you get someone that ramps them up, so breath work isn't helpful, but it's always my go-to. Let's try either box breathing or 4 in, 4 out. And another thing that is helpful, so what I might have used if that didn't work, was grounding. So grounding tools that use your 5 senses. So with a teen, I might be like, all right, so we see and we smell and we taste and we hear and we feel. So bringing your attention to your senses, non-judgmentally, just kind of that, like, I want you to tell me 3 things you see. Describe them to me. I want you to tell me 3 things you can hear. Or you can do 5s. There's a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 where you use all your senses. But beginning to use your senses to come into the present moment can be a really effective way to not to ignore or push away your thoughts or your anxiety, but to kind of pay attention to the better thing, which, I mean, the title of the book is Finding the Better Story. So even that better story, God gave us these beautiful, amazing, regulating bodies to use and his creation to engage in. So senses are my second tool, that grounding. And then a third tool is the practice of gratitude. And again, not to stop or beat anxiety into submission or try to ignore it, but just to say, like, it's there. First, I think we actually have to acknowledge it and give it some validation. It is there. And I'm so grateful. I can remember this time I got through it before. I'm grateful the Lord's been with me before and will be with me again. I'm grateful that I'm sitting at this table and I can feel this tablecloth, and that I have a fuzzy dog at my feet who I can feel, so practicing gratitude as a rhythm of life can also be really helpful. And that's a little more cognitive, but I think we can engage our senses even in gratitude. So like my coffee, just to say, like, thank you, Jesus, for this warm cup of coffee and its taste,
I remember I had a young friend who she was in a full-blown panic attack, and I had no idea what to do for her, but she actually took control of her. She had been given tools just like you have described. And so she started breathing, and then she started thinking about her senses. about the things that were around her, I was amazed at how her body started calming down and she was able to get control of her own self. And, but I also really love, Liz, how you, in your devotional, you really give a scriptural basis for doing each one of those things. Each week you talk about one of those tools and you tie it into the scripture, just as you just mentioned that God gave us this creation and how it is definitely a reason for getting a steady, walking a steady path, getting our breath back, so to speak. You also, I really loved this, where you talk about, somebody's really anxious and they're upset and they're coming to you and to say, okay, just calm down, calm down. You say, no, this is not a good thing. And you use the ocean waves as a way of explaining that. Can you share with our audience how a wave is
Yes.
like that anxiety coming at us?
I love it. And I interviewed a whole bunch of teenagers before I started this book because I really wanted to hear what they wanted from it, what they hoped. And one of the first things I can remember Alexa saying to me is just what you're saying was like, it's so unhelpful when people tell me I shouldn't feel this way or I need to calm down. And she loves Taylor Swift. She's like, so I need to calm down. Like, I do not like that. That actually ramps up my anxiety. I need to be seen and acknowledged. And for someone to give the weight of like, you are feeling anxious, that stinks. Empathize with me. Like, think of how Jesus incarnates. He like sees and is with and acknowledges, and gives weight. So that like, just acknowledge it. So essentially when we say, hey, just you need to calm down, you need to just stop, we're telling someone to put their arm out to our anxiety and say, just stop, right? And how effective is that? Generally, not very. It generally ramps our anxiety up. So imagine someone standing at the edge of the ocean with this huge wave. Maybe they have to be in the ocean a little bit, putting their hand out saying, stop, wave, just stop anxiety, right? And when you do that, I mean, it sounds preposterous when you actually put yourself in that scene because the wave is going to crash over you. It might turn you upside down. You can find your face scraped against the bottom of the ocean floor, right? But when we acknowledge, like, yeah, there's a wave coming, I'm feeling these waves of anxiety. And the thing with emotions is learning instead of trying to fix them with this, I shouldn't be feeling this. I got to stop, just change my thought pattern. I just got to stop thinking about it or just stop it. But instead to say like, actually, emotion is energy and motion in my body. It's connected to thoughts and my body. I need to ride that energy wave that has a beginning, a middle, and an end. So I need to turn and body surf that wave. Instead of holding my hand out, what does it mean to turn and surf that wave, to ride that wave of energy out until it dissipates? So, and especially having someone who's done that, like an adult figure or a friend with you in it to kind of ride it with you can really help. But to feel your way through that surge of energy, that surge of anxiety, surge of whatever it is, sadness, happiness in your body is a much more holistic way it's feeling your way through your feelings, which is inconvenient and hard, but I think God made it for us to connect in. Emotion has purpose and it slows us down and it allows us to connect. So yeah, riding that wave out instead of that stop anxiety is what I talk about in the beginning of the book.
And Liz, as a counselor, that can apply to every emotion that we have. When we lost our son, Mark, we were encouraged to lean into the pain and to, like you just said, let it carry you. You have to, if you're going to be able to come to the other side, which of course we know, with some grief, you're never totally to the other side until you step into heaven, but it's leaning into the pain rather than, like you just said, saying it's not there, can't be there, I can't have these feelings. You do have those feelings. So we have to figure out what to do with them. You also talk about that there are some, I don't know if danger is the right word, but focusing only on the anxiety, making it all about the anxiety. And I think you kind of alluded to it earlier when you talked about sometimes it's our identity. Like with teenagers, there's a danger of saying, yes, I'm anxious, you're anxious, she's anxious, we're all anxious. And the focus is there. What is the danger of that? And what can we encourage the focus to be on instead of that root of anxiety?
Yeah. I think like I've seen with other pathology or mental health issues, because online you can find fellowship or groups to connect to, if that's self-harm, if that's they're looking to belong. So they might take something like anxiety or depression and then feel a sense of belonging around it. And it's not something to say you shouldn't. It's not helpful to should our kids or ourselves. But I think to even bring awareness through curious questions like, hey, did y'all notice that you all are kind of anxious? And what's that like to begin looking at it so much that you're kind of sucked in by it? So I'd say curiosity and compassion are my first two approaches if that's a conversation happening like in the Sunday school room with my kids. But I do think we in the Lord don't have to be afraid of approaching it. So we don't need to avoid the conversation or the reality they might be building some identity around it. Like, I'm an anxious person. I have anxiety disorder, like that. If that's true, let's like meet them where they are, explore what that means, and then offer them the moreness of like, it sounds like anxiety is a big part of your story. Like the better story of our Christian story is your identity is in Christ. You are secure and held fast. You are the beloved of God. And I'd want to say, like, in offering that, I don't want to bulldoze in to dismiss their experience of anxiety. I really want to give it the weight before, like, such a dance of how am I going to offer the truth of the better story. I might actually I'm going to share a story about myself. Like, here's how I began to build my whole identity around soccer. It's something that's still tempting for me, or like performance, whatever it is, teaching or even writing. And the Lord gently invites me to over and over and over again each day to turn back to him, noticing like the anxiety is there and like there's a better thing. There's you, Jesus. You meet me here and you offer me full life in yourself and an anchor for my soul when it's anxiously floating, So yeah, just it's maybe no different than any idol or anything we begin rotating around in our hearts. Sometimes it might be anxiety or a disorder of some sort with students. And so you're meeting them there, seeing them, loving them. And then maybe even it's through the prayer that you're praying, like, Lord, I pray that they'll know that they're more than their anxiety. And then see them in that. Like, if they're an image bearer, you get to call out to the dignity and the image of God that you see in the student. Like, you're anxious. Yes. You are also a kind, creative brother, and you're a hard worker, and I love the way you care for your animals in your house. You steward them beautifully. So you can call out their image bearing and give them a picture of who they are that's more than their anxiety, right? Because it just can be so focusing in it, myopic, it shrinks our vision of ourselves and of the world. So just to say, I see how shrunk that is, and like, let's just gently and kindly expand that. You're more than that, and there's more for you. But not without seeing them and validating in that.
What you talk about being an image bearer, and I think, can you unpack that a little bit? Because what I'm hearing you say is you're redirecting the emotions. You're not negating the emotions. You're not ignoring that. But it's kind of like when you're in a full-blown panic attack and you encourage the person to breathe and then to think about those things that they can feel and touch, and gratitude and all of those things. But what is the ultimate direction that we want to point someone to who is experiencing that kind of anxiety and it's become their identity? You talk about the better story. Tell us what that means, being an image bearer, and what is the better story?
Yeah, the better story from Genesis to Revelation is going to be God coming for us, his love coming for every part of us, every anxious, dark, broken part of his people, and making a people for himself. So drawing his image bearers back to himself is what I would say that story is, of God wanting to see his glory and his love pervade every inch of creation. And he's so creative in the ways that he ekes his glory, his love into us and creation, that there's kind of infinite. How does that look between two people, like me and then my anxious teen that I'm working with is having a panic attack? A myriad of ways, right? To be able to offer them Jesus in the moment, it starts with prayer. So if I have a kid who's having a panic attack, the first thing I'm going to do is pray as I'm coming toward them and saying, hey, I want you to look me in the eyes. Tell me what color my eyes are. So grounding that, like helping them even just use their body first and foremost. So their brain, I'm going to give you a hand brain lesson. Their brain is offline in this moment. If this is like a brain, This is your amygdala and the emotional center of your brain. And this is your prefrontal cortex, this part up here that makes decisions. And when it's online, can think logically and rationally. It's important for executive functioning. And then this is your brain stem down here for motor coordination and breath and basics. Everything that's true of a baby when they're wet and they need to be changed. Sleep, all that stuff happens down here. So when they are in a panic attack mode, they're offline, they flip their lid. So trying to talk to them and make them think is actually extremely unhelpful. So you're going to meet them here in that breath work and with their body and with co-regulating. So that incarnational presence to say like, all right, breathe with me. I want you to tell me what you see on my face. I want you to, use those senses. And as they calm down and come back on, depending on the kid and your relationship with the kid, so context, it might be like they just start, you see their shoulders relaxing, their body relaxing. Like, isn't it amazing that the Lord made your body to be able to regulate itself like that? Like that, just to sit in the wonder of God's work in the moment in and through your body and through that relationship could be a way to invite them into the bigger story. And then, there's just so many different ways. Can I pray for you? Can we thank the Lord that he did help us calm your body down in this way? And forever, you're going to have a tool, a memory in your little toolkit to say like, I got through that. Because the next time, if it happens, it's very terrifying. Panic attacks, the description I've had from clients and friends is like, it feels like you're going to die, like very, very scary. So to remember, I've been through this, I can get through this. That's a big tool. And golly, yeah, the ways the Lord meets us in things like this. Think about this. I mean, you talked about your son, like in grief, in pain and anxiety, they're infinitely creative, I think. So even just to be curious, there's not a recipe. There's, for me, like I want to be steeped in the word and in the spirit and in prayer of like, Lord, how are you inviting me to show up with you? Because you're in me, you're with me, to love this kid who's in front of me with whatever you've given me, like my story, my skills, my silence, or my speaking, so prayerfully to invite them to that story of knowing, hey, there's more. Seems like it's everything, but there's a before and there's going to be an after. And in our story, like our past is secure because it is finished on the cross, and our future is secure because we're headed toward when everything is being made right. And we get these tastes of this new heavens, new earth, in moments where it's beautiful and calm and there's joy, but we're in that now and not yet. So even just to give kids a context for like, yep, past is secure. All the what ifs of your future are secure in Christ. And we're kind of giving weight to the now, which is broken and hard. And the Lord is at work.
Yeah, I really appreciated the way in your book, Anxiety, that you set that foundation right from the start. You start right with Genesis, and that we live in a broken world. But this is not all there is. And I love the way that you painted the picture of how God pursued Adam and Eve after they just blew everything up. That's a picture of how he pursues us. He does not give up on his children. He is always pursuing us. And what a beautiful picture of the grace that God has extended to us. And I think that your little illustration about the brain is really helpful because I think, again, you could look at a child that's a teenager or any person that's out of control and be demanding that they stop, like a baby. Stop crying. We'll change my diaper and maybe I will. Kind of thing. It's getting to those basics and recognizing that the person can't get there without the grounding that you are talking about. So it's very practical. And in case you've joined us a little bit later in the conversation, I'm Sharon Betters and I'm talking with Liz Edrington, and we're talking about anxiety, and especially what she has written in the book that she has called Anxiety, the Better Story. And we like to say that our podcast is like salty peanuts. We bet you can't eat just one, and you're going to want more. And I hope that you're going to want to know more about what we're talking about and get Liz's book. It's called Anxiety by Liz Edrington. Liz, I'm thinking about parents who are raising these volatile teenagers who I think about one situation where a young girl was on the phone all night. Her parents didn't realize it until the next day because her friend was having an emotional breakdown. And their daughter was afraid if she got off the phone, her friend might kill herself. And So, of course, her parents talked to her and said, this is too big for you, and we don't want this to happen again. You come and get us. But how do parents help their children, help their friends, recognize when it's too much? And then the second part of that would be, what can parents look for to know, okay, this is beyond what I can help my child with. We need to get some help here, because the anxiety is just exploding in her soul.
Yeah, really great questions. Let's see. So with the friends, the first question was, how do we help a kid know that they are beyond beyond the limits of maybe how they should be caring for another friend?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that story of them meeting their kid where they are. I think when you were telling it, my inclination is make sure to first bless your kid for desiring to help and love and serve, even though it's maybe gone too far and they're taking too much on. To first say, like, I love your heart to love your friend is so important. Like, bless that dignity, see that image bearing. And then to say, like, all right, so if this happened again, let's talk about what boundaries and limits are going to both help you to love them and help you be in a friendship with them that's good for both of you, because that's really important also. So talking about boundaries and limits, limits are what help us have, or boundaries, like they're what help us have relationship with each other. They're not walls, they're not fences. All a boundary is really what's okay and what's not. So let's help you decide first, like, what's okay and what's not with this friend. And it might even be helpful to have a conversation with your friend, maybe with us and your parents, so you guys will know, hey, if this happens again, I'm so glad you called me and you reached out. What a great thing. I might not be the best person to help you next time. So what if you know that you can call this hotline? What if you know you can go wake up your parent? Or hopefully this is a parent mitigating, not the teenager. But I would say conversation about limits and boundaries could be important. Kids are still probably going to do stuff like that, right? So it's the trusting relationship between parent and teen is the most important thing in this, of like, I'm so glad you told me, and I hope you'll tell me again if this happens again, because I want to walk with you. And you're figuring it out. You're not necessarily going to do it right. And you might be tempted to, I might not cast that. You might be tempted to do it again, but like, kids are loyal. I mean, they want to help. So you talk about it.
They keep secrets.
Of course. And a part of individualism,
that's confidence. Yeah.
Yeah. They're supposed to be developing, developmentally, it makes sense that they are individuating. They shouldn't be telling you everything. If they're telling you everything, that might be a sign of something else not being great. So respecting, hey, they're learning to do life on their own. I want to encourage that with probably, again, maybe it's a story of, here's when I realized I overstepped a boundary with a friend and then felt overly responsible. And here's what it's looked like for me to learn to trust Jesus with a person who's really hurting, and to offer the care that I've decided to the limits, the care I can offer. I can offer a phone call for an hour and connect them to another resource, and I can pray for them. And that's it. So kind of having a plan or talking through limits could be really important, and knowing your kid's still going to keep things from you, so check in, ask like, hey, how's it going with that friend? Have you had any other conversations? Like, just that relationship with them is such the priority to keep active and keep building trust in, and asking for forgiveness when you fail them, or you're over controlling, or you haven't paid enough attention to them. So repair along the way. So limits with friends, and kind of talking through that, and boundaries. And then remind me of the other question.
When let me rephrase it a little bit. Speak to the parent who is listening and is recognizing that her teenage daughter is in trouble emotionally. She feels as though she is in a downward spiral, and she doesn't know what to do. What can a parent do for that child? And as we're wrapping up, what kind of hope can you give to those parents who are struggling with a teenager who is really beyond what you would consider a normal, worrying, anxious, normal teen kind of emotion?
Yeah. The first thing I'd say is, I love that you're recognizing and you're able to see your child, and I want to bless that. So clearly just to acknowledge and bless, you love your kid. That's a beautiful thing. And to be able to see your kid, even offer the words of what you see in them back to them of like, I see that you're in your room more often and your door's closed and you're not coming out and hanging out with us quite as much. And you're not even hanging out with your friends quite as much. So to see them compassionately is a first step, and then see what your child gives you back. Like, do they notice that too? Do they not? Where are they with realizing I'm having a problem? The hope, and we'll go more into that. The hope, I'd say, is like, you have the God of the world with you. Jesus is your ability to minister to and love your kid, to parent your kid. You're going to bumble through it like all of us do in life with whatever, like as a counselor, as a professor, as a parent, and like he is with you. Stop and pray, see what thoughts he gives you and what directions, and know like he's gone before you. We can use scripture to say that. You're not alone in this. And that posture of like, I'm figuring it out as I go is so much of parenting, right? Like, you don't have all the answers. You're not supposed to. There's a way the Lord invites us to lean in and depend on him with every step that's so uncomfortable, but is such a grace of like, he wants us to draw near and to rely on him for the conversation you're going to have with your student, with your teenager. And to even, I think in your head, know this is the beginning. Like this, if this is the first time you're talking about your student, your teenager maybe being in a crisis, this plan in your mind for it to be very short and quick, not to be an hour long, like, let's hash all this out right now, but just to like, hey, I just noticed some things. Tell me what it's like for you going through this, like to be, so you're incarnating, you're being with them, seeing them and meeting them where they are. And that's going to give you more data to say what next. Hey, do you feel like you need some more help? Like, if so, are you interested in pursuing a counselor or talking to your youth pastor? Or, one of my best friends is like a mentor to you. You want to talk to Barbara, like whoever it is. So what's another resource that, or even your general physician, your pediatrician, like what's a next resource if they're open to that? And then you get to make the judgment call if they're not, and you see like, yeah, it doesn't matter. We have to get another resource. You can bless, like, I see you're not ready, but I think it's time. I'm going to make the parent decision because I love you to say, we're going to take next steps here. I'm going to walk with you and we're going to go see a counselor together and find someone that's a good fit. So you're going to be with me in this, finding a counselor that you like, that's a good fit, but we're going to find somebody for you to walk with you.
Yeah, that's all good. And I know that there is someone who is listening who is jotting down what you're saying, Liz, because they're in that situation with a child that they deeply love and they just don't know the next step. So I just appreciate so much, Liz, that you have a heart for sharing the hope that you've experienced and that is available to each of us in Jesus. And Liz Edrington is our guest today for the Help and Hope podcast. And again, her book is called Anxiety, The Better Story. It's available anywhere, everywhere. I highly recommend it. I'm giving it as gifts to young adults that I know are struggling with anxiety, and I'm reading it myself. So I highly recommend it, and I hope that many of you will get it. I'm Sharon Betters, and this is the Help and Hope podcast. And if you would like more stories like this, more equipping moments like this, go to helpandhopenow.org, where you're going to find lots of redemption stories, lots of free resources that are designed to help turn your heart toward Jesus. Thanks so much for joining us, and I look forward to being with you again.